in the United States and astronomers were Black. So we like to focus when we're exploring this phenomenon with students to start us off. We're thinking about data, right? So these are just numbers that we're presenting. Don't necessarily interpret things yet, but just to give you some additional stats that you can use along with this. So in essence, when you look at this data, a white American is about 3 times more likely to become a physicist than a Black American. And if you put in gender into that equation, a white male is 5 times more likely to become a physicist than a Black female. So thus the name of the curriculum, Underrepresentation. And I looked at some more current data just to kind of see what was happening more recently. This is degrees awarded. So this is physics degrees awarded, not quite as comparable as working physicists. But if you look at the Black or African American slice, it's down there about 3% again. So pretty similar to what we saw here, maybe even a little bit less in terms of people who are graduating with a physics degree in 2022. So the point of this first unit with students is that certain groups of people are underrepresented or overrepresented in physics or other sciences. We have graphs for very different sciences. We're just focusing on physics for today. Also in Unit 1, students are able to do more graph analysis. They also start to think about why this might be. And they also get to reflect on whether this matters. So after we touch on that, we kind of present this as a curious phenomenon. Students in Unit 2 start to gain relevant knowledge. So Unit 2 has various lessons. I'm going to show you the whole kind of list of lessons that we have. You'll see that in Unit 2 there are a lot of lessons that focus on different isms. So today we're going to put on our student hat again for a minute here. Or actually, I think what I'll do is I'll show you what I'm going to do with students. I don't think we have time to go through the entire activity, but we'll share what we're going to do. So briefly from a student perspective, here's the lesson of what is racism. There's also, as I mentioned, sexism lessons, ableism, classism. So you can all focus in on those isms that are particularly relevant to your community. So one example of an activity that you can do with your students is to have these statements either on a piece of paper or a digital tool or some other way of getting students to check which of these statements they think is racism or represents an example of racism. And so we're going to keep our teacher hat on, thinking about these statements as I read them, and what would you do? And what would your students do? Would you check this box or would you not check this box? So statements like someone explaining how they view race with a phrase, quote, I don't see color, I just see people. A college elevating the admission chances of an applicant because of their underrepresented race. A curriculum that improves learning for all students, that improves white students learning more than students of color. A white person not speaking up when they overhear a joke that relies on stereotypes about Asian people. And lastly, a science lab hiring someone who has a big GPA. So you can probably think how students would respond to these. You can also, of course, think about how you would respond to these. The goal here is that racism definitions, a lot like our science definition, are probably going to vary. And so putting on kind of our student hat or our teacher hat again, kind of the next steps that you can do with students are here on this screen. So we can, again, in small groups, kind of think about where are our definitions similar, where are they different, and then the idea of does intention versus outcome matter? Do your definitions include things like individuals and systems? And then reporting out again, having students report out a definition of racism that everyone can agree about. The point of this lesson in particular is that certain races of people experience privilege or marginalization in science and the world. So other lessons in Unit 2 then, what comes next, you can pick, many of us have picked some of these that more appropriately align with what our student populations look like. We have lessons like meritocracy, stereotype threat, too. And I think one of the most important things that you can do for students is after you present them with some information that is incredibly hard to hear for several students, is to give them some way of empowerment to get an action taken. Moving to what students say, we have small student groups lead brainstorming sessions, or have a student lead this. That's what I always like to do. So these are just some examples of what students have come up with for things that they might be able to do to take action after participating in the unit so far. Things like using your platform, emailing Congress people, learning about other cultures, educating others, all great ideas that students have come up with. And here are some examples of student-led projects that have come out of this curriculum. So one of the examples was writing a self-care pamphlet for Black, Indigenous people of color in sciences. This is on the right here, a long display in the hallway where students decided to highlight physicists of color. Some other ideas that have come out of classes have been applying to be a tutor for Boys and Girls Club, researching common microaggressions and how both the white male and the black male might respond to those, composing a start of the semester speech for professors or instructors to read to their classes, volunteering for a nonprofit to support incarcerated Black men, creating a deck of playing cards that highlights my contributions to STEM. I've seen all of these things. I've seen that my students have made posters, they've done educational, they've presented just presented this information in their own way to parents. It's been inspirational to see what they did. These are not all my students, by the way. These are kind of our collective editors' responses for things that they've seen. Okay, so now that I hope I've given you a good overview of how things work, which again, I hope that we'll have a longer PE together later this year, that we can dive into these resources more, because this is a very brief overview. I just want to share with you how do you access the resources and how do you navigate them. So this is our website. It's just www.underrep.com. If you work from here, we'll take you to directly to that website as well. Each of the lessons that I've been talking about and all the ones that we listed have a nicely formatted PDF lesson plan along with teacher notes, talk moves, all sorts of kind of considerations, questions, homework, etc. We also spend a lot of time, because we know teaching these things is not easy, and that you might not be ready or able to just kind of go back and decide, I'm going to do this. So we have a lot of resources for planning your implementation, thinking about facilitating these kind of difficult conversations with students, connecting with your community to help spread the word about what you're going to be doing and build support, and then of course the lesson plans themselves. So this is again the list of all of the lessons that we have in this curriculum, and I want to share with you a little bit about how our teachers have kind of picked and chosen in different contexts in which they've taught this unit, or taught this, because they're all called units, but taught this project or however you want to think about the entire gamut. So some different contexts for you. We've got examples of 10th grade chemistry class, 40-minute classes, kind of a day-by-day breakdown of how they were doing that. It's also color-coded. You can see that setting the stages in all of these. We also, as scientists ourselves, enjoy data. So we have a student pre- and post-survey so that we can also measure how students' attitudes have shifted, if they've enjoyed the curriculum, suggest changes, etc. So this is about a 7-day stretch in this 10th grade chemistry class. Some schools that have longer periods, 90-minute blocks. This was an AP biology class that took 2 days to kind of go through an abbreviated version of the curriculum. You can see that the middle section, the green section, has different pieces that have been pulled in depending on the context for the teacher. And then example 3 over here to the right is a college physics class that took 4 days. I think 1 day a week for several weeks to kind of talk about these issues and dive into meritocracy, systemic racism, etc. One other thing I wanted to say too is that I think our lessons, most of them take somewhere between about 30 talking. I'm sorry to cut off the conversations. But I do want to give, if possible, if we can get questions answered, then that would be great for our last 5 minutes or so together. I also want to give you some additional information. Again, if you are looking for the curriculum, our curriculum is at underrep.com, the website I showed you. And thank you very much for coming to this presentation, and hopefully we'll keep the conversation going. If you have